Hey, I'm Tom. That back there's Mike. And I like big men. Abnormally big. With like a little tuft of hair right here, but like not too much. Like more skin than hair, but a little bit there. Maybe like a little baby mullet. Maybe dress them in some like little biker shorts and tin foil. Ooh, a desire for a strap would be ideal. Siri, save Grinder bio. Now that that's done, this is a brief history of Gigante in WCW. For those of you who don't know, the 7'7" Jorge Gonzalez was a third-round draft pick for the Atlanta Hawks in the 1989 NBA draft. I know nothing about basketball, but I assume that's bad. The Hawks drafted him completely based on the fact that he could just like do a little boop and get the ball in the hoop. Just like a little boop. Didn't even need to jump. I don't think they even saw him play a lot because how much tape of the Argentine national team was floating around in the late 80s? It's not like today where you're just scrolling through Instagram and you find 9 different dudes that swear they're 8 feet tall and are the world's tallest man, but they never actually stand next to anything, yet they have like 100 million followers. Within days, the Hawks realized that the Jorge Gonzalez project's a bust. For all of his size, his knees are shot, he's too slow, he can't get up and down the court. It's just not going to work. But, you know, everybody really likes the guy. He's a sweetheart. Everyone thinks he's so polite and sweet. They don't want to just dump him off. I mean, he's brand new to this country, doesn't really know his way around, doesn't really fit in cars. And you're going to tell him, hey, sorry, we're not paying you anymore. Go fuck off to Argentina. Ted Turner takes one look at Jorge and thinks, there's got to be some place of entertainment for a guy whose shoes can house at least 3 families by themselves. And he had recently purchased a wrestling company back in late 1988. He became the owner of World Championship Wrestling, as they were beginning to call it. He thought, they're big fellas. He's a really big fella. What if he went over there and became the biggest of the big fellas? He'd be so popular. And so Turner converted Jorge's contract from an NBA Atlanta Hawks deal to a WCW wrestling contract. That seems like it should be illegal. Like you should have to like fire him and then I don't know. And that's why I'm sitting here in this YouTube box in front of this camera on this microphone talking about professional wrestling. Because my brain is mushy goose poop. I couldn't be a lawyer. And so WCW is tasked with having to train this fella to wrestle. You obviously can't just stick him in the ring and go, wrestle. Big problem, he had never, like, seen wrestling, let alone knew what it was. So they hired Fidel Sierra, who's a veteran journeyman, better known as Cuba's Top Gun, one half of Los Especialistas, or just Fidel Sierra in a mask. He was tasked with training this big fella and teaching him what wrestling was, let alone how to do it safely when you're twice the size of everybody else in the industry. And so Sierra, along with his cousin / stepbrother, which you can look that whole mess up on your own in your own time, Bill Alfonso, were tasked with being Jorge's translators, guides, trainers, and everything else during his stint in WCW. And there was a lot of anticipation built. You know, Connie Chung did a feature about the NWA on her show on CBS, and they staged a whole thing where they're like sketching out his costume and creating a gimmick for him on CBS to hype it up. The NWA, we make movies. A lot of folks in the NWA were talking about how they had finally gotten their Andre the Giant. He was going to be their big drawing card. It was going to be Sting, Luger, and Jorge. Still wasn't really coming along, but I don't blame him. Listen, again, he has so much going against him here. He didn't know what wrestling was, let alone could tell you what any wrestling moves were before he got into a ring. He didn't know what any of this looked like. He had to be shown brand new. Also, the ring and all of his opponents are so much smaller than he was. Every movement in the ring is specific and unique to him in ways that no trainer could have ever prepped for. Some of the greatest wrestlers of all time would probably have been a lot worse if all of their opponents came up to their navel, you know? But Jim heard one of this guy in the ring, damn it. We needed to get our giant out on the road. May of 1990, Capital Combat, Return to RoboCop, that's a whole thing. They introduced Jorge to the crowd as El Gigante, you know, the giant. And this costume they put him in is something. He looks like what your grandpa thought the year 2000 was going to look like back then. Wearing like tinfoil and all sparkly silver. Like, he's from Argentina, not Mars. Like, he probably would have stood out enough if you just sent him out there and been like, stand there. You didn't need to put like all the gadgets and the gadgets on him. A couple weeks later, Jorge starts wrestling on house shows, mostly against his trainer Fidel Sierra under a mask as El Diablo, so they can essentially train in front of people. He has a few matches with Randy Colley, aka Moondog Rex, under a mask as Dr. X. Where did he go to school? What did he get his doctorate in? There's a lot of Dr. X's floating around wrestling around this time. Not one of them ever came forward with proof on paper from any of these schools. Could you imagine how big it would have been for enrollment at University of Miami, Ohio, if they could prove that Dr. Tom Pritchard studied Desire there? July 1990, Great American Bash in Baltimore. El Gigante has his coming out party and a 6-man tag as a member of the Dudes with Attitudes. Good, bad, or indifferent, they do have attitudes. They went to a double DQ with the 4 Horsemen, but there were 3 of them. And the Horsemen mostly were just like, whoa, he's big! Because that's what you do when there's a big guy in the ring. You go, whoa, he's big. Like, whenever I go to NBA games, I see all those guys on the court, and I'm just the whole time, whoa, they're big. Ah! And then after that, old El Gigante is back on the house show circuit for the most part. A lot of battle royal wins. A lot of fun stories from the wrestlers on those shows about how they had to explain to him what the hell a battle royal was. I believe Bobby Eaton, through Jim Cornette, was the first one to really come out and talk about that. They had to show him, okay, so in a battle royal, you are eliminated by being thrown over the top rope. Whereas in all these other matches, you have to pin the fella or make him submit. He could not comprehend this. Again, had never seen wrestling. And Bobby, like, actually working with him and trying to get him through and trying to show him things. Bobby Eaton's a saint. Winter of 1990, there's a lot of 6-man tags. El Gigante and the Southern Boys, or El Gigante and Ricky Morton and Tommy Rich. They were just teaming El Gigante up with all the guys that the middle-aged Southern housewives wanted to make out with, you know, really get them established with that demo. A lot of 6-man tags with those dudes against the Freebirds and the State Patrol, Bobby Eaton, Dr. X. Again, everyone's just kind of training this guy on the road, trying to figure out what the hell they're going to do with a guy that can probably touch the lights. You know, screw one in, screw one out, just standing in the ring. And then he went back home for Christmas, spends about a month back in Argentina. Again, the poor guy's homesick. He just wants to see his mom and his friends. He loves earning money in America, but he misses his family, misses his surroundings back there. Come late January, early February, he really becomes more of a regular on TV. Wrestles a lot of handicap matches, squash matches on television. State Patrol, all those guys make him look all good and tall. And then comes arguably the most infamous or famous or best period of his career. Ric Flair and Sting, they've wrestled themselves out. They've been wrestling each other for like years. Flair just beat Sting for the world title at the Meadowlands in New Jersey. You know, they could do one more set of Sting rematches, but they need to move on to somebody else. And that somebody is 28 feet tall from Argentina. And so they start setting up Ric Flair and El Gigante around the loop. After El Gigante special referees a bunch of Flair Sting matches, that poor guy had to get up and down counting falls. Could you imagine that on those knees? Oof. But what this is most remembered for is I want the belt. Sorry, that was horrible. That's why I don't do voices. I'm not a voices guy. Standing in front of a green screen, he wanted the belt. Standing penis to face with Ric Flair, I want the belt. In the ring with Barry Windham and Sid Vicious, I want the belt. He wanted the belt at all costs. And he wrestled Flair around the horn. The infamous stories, Ric Flair got a 3-star match out of an 8-foot giant who barely knew what wrestling looked like. He just stood there and Flair flew around everywhere. After that's over, they start building up to matches with Sid and El Gigante over who's the real giant in WCW. And what I would have said if I were in those creative meetings is, hey, does anyone have a measuring tape? Sid's like 6'8". El Gigante's like 7'7". Like, it's obvious who the giant is. I don't know. Just look at them. Maybe Sid could be like, you're tall, but I have better boobs than you. Because he did. Sid had great boobs. Tremendous boobs. But as they're building to the climax of that feud, El Gigante also starts working with the one-man gang who also thinks he's the giant of WCW. Again, we gotta come up with different feud ideas for this guy. Like, it's obvious. He's so big. But the reason why they start the one-man gang feud before the Sid feud's over is Sid puts in his notice. He's going to the WWF. And they're afraid they're not going to be able to finish the Sid versus Gigante feud at Super Brawl because he's out the door. But in fact, Sid does show up to Super Brawl for the blow-off with Gigante in the stretcher match. A stretcher match supposed to beat up a guy so bad that you put him on a stretcher and send him to the ambulance or whatever, which Sid had been doing to guys for months and months. This was supposed to be the blow-off to what Sid had been doing to all the enhancement guys, was Gigante doing it to him, which again, better hook than I'm the real giant. But Sid's like, I don't want to do that. I'm going to wrestle Hulk Hogan. So instead, he lets Gigante pin him in 5 seconds. And then Gigante and One Man Gang have an impromptu stretcher match that's not really a stretcher match. While Sid just doop-de-doop-de-doop off in the background. So One Man Gang is feuding with Gigante on TV. Gigante's still wrestling with Ric Flair on the house shows. And then get a load of this. I'm just going to read this off my phone. July 7th, 1991, Gigante, Sting, Lex Luger, and the Yellow Dog defeated Barry Windham, Nikita Koloff, Kevin Sullivan, and the One Man Gang with Magnum TA as referee in a War Games match at the Meadowlands. There is very grainy, shitty footage of it on YouTube because we didn't have good cameras back then. What a match. That really happened. As part of the One Man Gang feud back in May, Gang had shaved Gigante's head. They did it to Andre, they could do it to Gigante, and it still works as he's big and tall. Newton's law of freakish height. Well, April 25th, Gigante and One Man Gang have their big squared out career versus One Man Gang's hair to settle this feud once and for all at the Omni. Now you're asking, why is this not on a pay-per-view or even a Clash of the Champions? Well, you see, WCW centered a lot of stuff around Omni house shows that would never see the light of day on television. Because the Turner executives who were overseeing WCW would never watch the TV, but they would go to the Omni house shows and just kind of sit there like this. Be like, okay, well, I guess they filled the building, so this isn't going so bad, right? And instead of, looking at the books and seeing how much money the company was losing, they were like, oh, there are people in the seats here. And oh, hey, they like that Sting fella. I guess we can let this company stay open for another month. If you go back and watch old episodes of World Championship Wrestling or Saturday Night, they cannot shut the fuck up about the Omni, even if you're living in Vermont. September 91, the Clash of the Champions, Gigante wins a big battle royal. Now, in the Observer and the Torch at the time, there was a story that this was supposed to be a Georgia red clay mud battle royal, where the ring would be filled with Georgia red clay mud, which sounds like so many injuries waiting to happen. And that Jim Herd had told Dusty Rhodes, hey man, that's ridiculous. I recently got a genuinely nice message from somebody very close to the situation. This guy's known as a bit of a nightmare, but I like him. I think he's nice. Denying that Dusty ever had anything to do with that, or that it was ever going to happen, so I'm backing off of that story, dog. October 91, Gigante and his beautiful bald head are in the Chamber of Horrors. He mostly just stands around awkwardly and is like, "Arr!" in this big giant cage, watching Abdul the Butcher be electrocuted. The rest of 1991, Gigante is entrusted with helping another youngster along, trying to find his way in the ring. Oh, Van Hammer. They wrestle Abdul the Butcher and Cactus Jack for a couple of months at house shows. Gigante just taking this young man under his wing, showing him how to work. He's in the Lethal Lottery at Starrcade, teaming with a very similar wrestler to him, Larry Zbyszko. They lose to Dustin Rhodes and Richard Morton in a match. And then the first part of 1992, he spends based off of a match at the Tokyo Dome, where they did a big schmoz. They came back to America. Vader and Gigante have a bunch of double countouts around the horn over, again, who's the real giant in WCW. Vader was 6'3". As somebody who looks like a fat little baby most of the time, I can say that Vader looked like a fat little baby in the ring with Gigante. He wasn't a giant of WCW. Come the fuck on, Dusty. And the other thing Gigante did of note, the first quarter of 92, is a squash match from Worldwide in February. He teamed with PN News. And we're just going to watch him dance here while PN News busts a rhyme. Look at this. Look at those moves. Swaying back and forth, making the grown folks all weak in the knees. Shake it, Jorge. At the end of February, Gigante's deal with WCW comes up, and he's like, I think I'm going to wrap up. Because around that time, the World Wrestling Federation had sent feelers over to Jorge. Like, hey, man, you're really big. You should be on our team, not that one. Kind of like in Little Giants when Danny O'Shea stole Spike out from his brother Kevin, saying, hey, you should be on the Little Giants. And then Kevin's like, hey, man, listen, you're big, you're mean, you've already mostly gone through puberty. You should be on a real team like the Cowboys. That's kind of what happened with El Gigante here. He goes over to the WWF, becomes a nude guy for a few years. We all find out he doesn't actually have a penis. A whole weird situation. And then in fall 1995, WCW reaches out to him again. They're like, hey man, Hulk Hogan wants to wrestle you. He really wants to wrestle you. He's on our side now. And he should come back to our side because Hulk Hogan's here now. And he wants you. El Gigante was set to return to WCW as the Yeti, which would have made that name make a lot more sense. The Giant Gonzalez costume was a Yeti suit. But last minute, right before he's supposed to fly over from Argentina, he has a diabetic attack. He's not able to get on an airplane. He's a really bad idea to get back in the ring. He's not doing well health-wise. And so Ron Reese gets wrapped in a bunch of toilet paper, and they're like, shit, Mummy, Yeti, close enough. And thus ends El Gigante's history with World Championship Wrestling. If you liked my salacious soliloquy about the biggest man to ever wrestle in a wrestling ring, please make sure, like, comment, subscribe, click the hype button if it's there. It helps. It really does. Make sure to become a member of the channel like all these lovely folks that I'm showing you right now. Look at them. They're all virile. They could produce many children if they wanted to. Maybe they don't want to, because they know that their seed and or egg are just too good. Also check out my streams every Tuesday at 9 p.m. on Twitch and every other Sunday at 9 here on YouTube. I'm Tom. That's Mike back there. And oh shit, I got a hit on Grindr. His name's Jorge. He's Latin. Where's he from? Beyond the grave?